Hey, what's up, guys? I'm about to break down my top 5 quarterbacks of the 2022 NFL Draft. Let's get right into it. So let's get right into it. At number 5, rounding out my top 5 quarterbacks list, I have QB from Cincinnati, Desmond Ridder. Now, Ridder continued to show improvement year to year, and that's why he's making my top 5 list. His last year at Cincinnati, definitely his best year. That's what you want to see from quarterbacks. You want to see constant improvement, and that's what Ridder showed us. So during his college career, he threw for 10,000 yards and 87 touchdowns, and also rushed for 2,100 yards and 28 touchdowns. And watching his film really showed me that Desmond is the most balanced quarterback in the 2022 class. He's not the best at one aspect of the quarterback position, but instead he's able to perform well on almost anything that a quarterback should be able to do. And what I mean by that is he checks a lot of boxes for a quarterback, including arm strength, accuracy, mobility, size, and he has an amazing vision when it comes to looking downfield and his overall ability as a runner. And all these traits make him an excellent dual-threat quarterback who time and time again showed that he can get the job done while not blowing you away with one skill. Now, as I hinted at previously, Desmond's biggest trait or his best trait isn't his speed or his accuracy or anything like that. His best trait is that he has insane amount of potential. He is some of the highest potential of this entire QB class, right? Or this entire class in general, and he's a developmental player. Because Ridder will fit perfectly in the role of a team that doesn't need an immediate superstar, but instead he can go to a team that has a good supporting cast. He has a run game that he can rely on. That's where he would fit perfectly. And a team that I think Ridder could really fit well in would be the Tennessee Titans. Because the Tennessee Titans have what I just described. They have that run game that he can lean on. And Desmond himself actually claimed that he modeled his entire quarterback game off of now Tennessee Titans quarterback Ryan Tannehill. And what better way for the master to be, replaced by the apprentice. Yes, that was a Star Wars reference. And with the 4th spot on my list, we have Ole Miss quarterback Matt Corral. Now, Matt Corral is one of the quickest arms that I've seen in this entire draft class. His accuracy and force he used to throw the ball allowed him to pass for 8,000 total yards and 57 touchdowns, as well as 1,300 yards and 18 total touchdowns in college. Now, keep in mind, Matt didn't play for these smaller schools like some of the other quarterbacks in this list, like Liberty. He played in the SEC and was facing sometimes more radically difficult schemes and defenses. And that's where you get fans being like, this game he looked bad. This game looked bad. I'm like, okay, guys, let's relax a little bit. He was playing Alabama, right? Alabama is one of the best college teams and college programs we've seen, throughout time, okay? So let's give the man a little bit of a break. But besides that, where I think Matt Corral is really going to flourish is in the short pass, medium pass, and RPO game. Because his arm allows him to snap throws into a wide receiver's chest or even tuck the ball and take it upfield, showcasing his full ability and talent in a scheme that allows him to play his best football. His accuracy on short and medium throws place the ball time and time again perfectly in the wide receiver's hands. But Matt, when he needs to, can throw those deep balls, and he shows it time and time again. He has these little flashes of being able to throw it 30, 40, 50 yards. Because there's one game specifically against Arkansas, I believe, where he threw the ball and that thing was in the air for about 60 yards, and that very much impressed me. And as for where do I think Matt Corral could go, I think Matt Corral should end up with the Saints. If the Saints hire Scotty Montgomery, former Colt. Scotty ran that RPO system in Indy. They bring that in. They bring Scotty in. They bring Matt in. Those two would fit very well together. And quarterback number 3 on my list is Sam Howell from UNC. And Sam Howell is incredibly tough, right? Every time I watch him, you can see he has the desire to win. He has that will to win. He puts everything on the line to win these football games, and he's an amazing leader, and that's more than you can say about some NFL quarterbacks nowadays, right? Because we're getting stuff in the news, stuff in the media about, is Kyler a leader? Is Kyler a guy that just points fingers? You're not going to get this from Sam Howell. And Sam Howell started his career at UNC as a true freshman, and in his first 3 years, he threw for 10,000 yards and 92 touchdowns and rushed for another 1,000 yards and 17 touchdowns. Now, you might say those rushing yards aren't that much for a guy. I suppose we can do both, but I promise you, all of those rushing yards, or most I'd say, came in his final season at UNC. Because out of those 1,000 yards and 17 touchdowns, he accumulated 828 rushing yards and 11 of those touchdowns just in his final year. And that's when he really showcased that agility and that speed that we knew he has. Because in high school, right, we all saw that stuff. He could run everywhere. He was jumping around people. He was running people over. And that really he didn't come into his own until his final year at UNC. But when I think of Sam Howell and when I watch his tape, I don't think of him as just a straight runner, right? To me, he reminds me of an old school type of quarterback, and I don't know. That's just the way I think of him. I think of him as guys that we grew up with, right? With Big Ben, Phillip Rivers, Eli Manning. That's where I kind of picture him. Not saying he's going to be as good as those guys, but he kind of has a similar play style to those guys. Because what I mean by that is like his pocket presence, his accuracy, his arm strength. All these allow him to scan the field, go through his reads, and when needed, he can shed off a hit, get out of the pocket, and move the chains. Or even he could, on a design run, a quarterback design run, he could get a couple yards, right? He could get a first down if needed. But like those other quarterbacks I mentioned, like Big Ben, he can shed off those hits. He can shed off those defenders. He can step out of the pocket. He can move around when needed, but his best football is played inside the pocket, letting him go through his reads and fire the ball downfield. Because like I said, Sam Howell's biggest strengths are his accuracy and his ability to get the ball into the perfect spot, especially on touch passes. Touch passes, he is one of the best I've ever seen. His touch passes are so beautiful. It gets right in the breadbasket of the wide receiver every single time, and that's an amazing trait to have as a quarterback and as a future NFL quarterback. And where do I think Sam Howell could go? I really think Sam Howell would do amazing on the Commanders, right? The Washington Commanders, they're a new team. That new team needs a new face. Reunite Sam with his former wide receiver, Diami Brown, right? They played at UNC together. We've seen what happens when you reunite college teammates, right? Of Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase. It looks like it makes a lot of sense to reunite former players together. So I think bring him to the Commanders, let him cook. But I could see him going a little earlier, a little later. And the second quarterback on my list is Auburn QB Malik Willis. Now, Malik Willis is undoubtedly one of the most physically talented players in this entire draft and one of the most physically gifted players I've ever got to watch film on. He spent 2 seasons in Auburn behind now Patriots backup quarterback Jarrett Stidham before transferring to Liberty, racking up 5,000 yards, 48 passing touchdowns, and 2,100 yards and 29 touchdowns on the floor. And Malik, most of the time, is the most physically gifted player on the entire field. And coming from a smaller school, he had to showcase that athleticism more often than some of these QBs from larger schools. I think this caused him to move and improvise more, which I think might negatively impacted him in some ways, but only due to his distrust of his offensive line, because, they let him get sacked like 50 times. And it's easy to see what the impact of getting sacked 50 times has on a quarterback, because when you watch Malik, you can see he might have developed the tendency to stare down his first read before he takes off out of a sometimes clean pocket, which is not smart, but that's something that NFL coaching can come and easily fix. But to me, I just believe that Malik's strengths and overall potential vastly outweigh all the negatives and cons. But what I think would be best for Malik would be sitting behind a veteran quarterback. I think that would be tremendously beneficial for the development and growth of the young 22-year-old. Because some of his greatest strengths that I hinted at earlier are his incredible athleticism, his overall accuracy and arm strength. Pair that with a scheme unlike Liberty's lack of sophisticated concepts, and Malik would develop into a true superstar. And as for where I'd love to see Malik go, I think I would love to see him go to the Falcons. They have a new GM, they have a new head coach in Arthur Smith, who came from Tennessee, had huge success in the run game with Ryan Tannehill. Bring that scheme to Atlanta, let Malik learn from a former MVP Matt Ryan, pair him with Kyle Pitts. Those two together would bring back the flashiness that we've seen in Falcons' past offenses. And I think you give him those things, and I think he has everything he needs to be a successful quarterback in the NFL. And finally, number 1, the best quarterback in the 2022 NFL draft to me is Pittsburgh quarterback Kenny Pickett. Now, Kenny Pickett spent his first 4 seasons, right? 4 out of 5. That's a long time to be a quarterback at college now. But he spent his first 4 seasons being that mid-round guy, that 3rd or 4th round guy. But his final season, his 5th season, he came to be what I think is the best quarterback in this NFL draft. Now, Kenny appeared in 39 college football games and amassed 12,000 yards, 81 passing touchdowns, and became a Heisman Trophy finalist in 2021. So going from being a 3rd or 4th round projected guy to a Heisman finalist, that's an insanely good jump. That's almost an unheard of jump, right? You're going from a guy who not a lot of people are looking at to being the guy that everyone's looking at. And the only problem I see when I watch his game is he's a little late on some of his throws, but I think that's because he wants to see his wide receiver break from his route, which could be something that's bad in the NFL, but that, again, could be easily fixed by NFL coaching. But I hate talking about quarterbacks and negatives, right? I hate just bashing on guys, right? That's not me. I don't just want to bash on guys 24/7. Let's talk about some of his strengths. Because, again, these are guys I am never going to be as good as the worst guy in this draft, right? Okay? These guys are freak athletes, and sometimes we forget these guys are just people, and they're not just like machines that we're watching, right? They're not just robots. They're people, right? We got to respect them just like we respect anybody else, just like we respect friends and family. So having said that, let's get into some of his best strengths. And first, he's a big man when it comes to playing QB. He comes in at 6'3", 220, and his size allows him to shrug off defenders in the pocket, which could be a very useful talent when coming against NFL pass rushers. But nowadays, right, we saw Aaron Donald in the Super Bowl, 2 sacks. You see guys like Von Miller, Myles Garrett. These are big guys. They want to rip your face off. It's good that you can be able to move around a little bit and shrug some of them off. And that's also probably a good trait because if where you go where I have you projected, right, if you're the first quarterback taken off the board, you're probably going to a team that's, in those high 10s, and they don't usually have the best offensive lines, right? They're there for a reason. Some things aren't going right, so you got to be able to move a little bit and shrug these guys off. And his size and speed allow him to be able to put his body on the line, get that first down, while also having an excellent ability to extend the play and keep his eyes downfield, looking for that open wide receiver. And while he is extremely talented on the run, he is also extremely confident in the pocket. He goes through his reads perfectly before finding the open target and firing the football right into their chest. And that's just an amazing talent to have, right? You have a guy that can do both. He can run for you, he can begin design runs for you, and he also can sling that thing downfield. It's excellent to see quarterbacks be able to do both so effectively nowadays. And as for where I'd love to see Kenny go, I'd love to see him go to the Steelers. The man went to Pittsburgh. I strongly want to see him in Pittsburgh, right? The man from Pitt going to Pitt, but I could see him going a lot earlier with the Panthers, Saints, or Broncos, who all could use a quarterback of his talents. And thank you all again so much for watching this video. There's going to be 10 more of these, right? Because I'm doing one a week, breaking down my top 5 players for that week's prospect. This week is quarterbacks. Next week it's wide receivers. So please just stick with me. I hope you enjoy it. Check out our TikTok where I'm breaking down a player every single day, Monday through Friday. Check out our website if you want to see a bigger breakdown of all these guys that I have on my board. And yeah, just thank you all so much. Check out our Twitter again, Instagram, anywhere on social media that you're there, we're probably there too. So again, thank you all, and please make sure to subscribe to the Harvester Sports.